Good evening. I will call this regularly scheduled meeting of Bridgewater Town Council to order. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Hearing none, have a motion to approve the agenda as circulated, please. Councillor Vergier, seconded by Councillor Thorburn. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. We'll start off with, I guess, the announcement for the public that the flag at Town Hall is at half-mast in recognition of the passing of Prince Philip, who is over my shoulder to the left there. Because we had a number of people ask if that was going to take place, so that is why, and it will remain so until after his funeral. Also, in terms of announcements, we have Volunteer Appreciation Week is the week of April 18th to 24th. It's National Volunteer Week, and so that proclamation will be on the Town of Bridgewater's website. And of course, we are always so indebted to the volunteers of this community, and it's always amazing when we're able to have our Volunteer Appreciation Night, when you walk into that high school, the junior high gym, and you see hundreds of people, and then you just realize that that's just one or two from almost all the organizations, but it's not all the volunteers, and it's not all the organizations. So it's just, unfortunately with COVID, we can't do that, but I look forward to, hopefully, knock on wood, next year, being able to return to an in-person event like that. Are there any other announcements from members of council? No, hearing none. In the spirit of volunteers, I'll turn it over to Deputy Mayor Tanner, and we're going to make 3 volunteer award presentations. Did you catch your breath yet?
No, I'm just struggling with Wi-Fi, but I can read off my phone, so we're good.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Luckily, I brought my glasses. So we have the 2021 Volunteer Awards. The 2021 Representative Volunteer Award presented to Siobhan Doyle. Siobhan is there. Perfect. She made it on time. Siobhan has been a tireless champion for youth in the school community. She served on the Bridgewater Elementary School Advisory Committee and was active with the School Travel Planning Committee, and currently serves on the Junior High School Advisory Committee. This work led her to volunteer with the town's Active Transportation Advisory Committee, where she has helped to organize bike to school events, active transportation assessments, and advocated for improvements to the physical environment to promote walking, rolling, and cycling. After 6 years of service, Siobhan recently resigned from the Board of Directors of Harbour House. She is also a youth ministry leader with St. Joseph's Parish. Congratulations, and thank you, Siobhan, for the work that you do. Next up, our 2021 Youth Volunteer Award presented to Adam Colbert. Adam spends many hours volunteering with various activities at Parkview Education Center. He helped to organize the Direct Brothers charity walk to his school from Crescent Beach to raise money for Pro Kids. Helped with tours for grades 9 last year, and helped to prepare a virtual tour of this year's grade 9s. He volunteered to be a student rep on their Q&A panel for grade 9s as they prepare to come to PBC, and volunteered to teach the grade 11 IB physics class how to use Microsoft Excel for lab work. He also DJ'd all the school's dances pre-COVID-19. Adam has also been a hockey volunteer timekeeper and broadcaster over the past couple of years, and volunteered for the Liberal Party during the federal election in 2019. Thank you, Adam, for all the work you do. He's also quite the machine on the bike at 902, by the way. 2021 Community Volunteer Organization Award presented to Bridgewater Souls Harbor Rescue Mission. Award being accepted by Vicky Sovey. In spring 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted many local services that Bridgewater residents rely on to meet their basic needs. Seniors struggled to get groceries, access health care, and faced isolation due to the lockdown. To address gaps that emerged in services, Bridgewater's Souls Harbor, along with other community partners, built a program to deliver food to isolated seniors. Soup kitchen meals prepared by Souls Harbor were delivered twice weekly to dozens of seniors. For many seniors, the small interaction with stranger bringing a lunch made all the difference during a difficult time for many in Bridgewater. Souls Harbor plays a crucial role as one of the few soup kitchens outside of Halifax. Souls Harbor's contribution to Bridgewater during this difficult time will continue to be remembered by those who were meaningfully impacted by the program. The town of Bridgewater sincerely appreciates the work of Souls Harbor. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Tanner. And thank you again to our volunteers, both present and those in the community, that especially that have really stepped up during the pandemic. So thank you very much. I don't believe we have any delegations this afternoon. It's been that kind of day. We have the minutes of March 22nd and March 29th, the regular council meeting and the special council meeting before you. Any errors, omissions, or deletions? Hearing none, can I have a motion to approve the minutes as circulated? Councillor Thorburn, seconded by Councillor McDonald. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Just a reminder for those who are watching or just those here in the gallery that we have our regular council meeting. We'll run through this until 7 o'clock, and we have a hard stop at 7 o'clock when the budget will be debated and discussed. And then we will either return to our regular council meeting once that is done, or if we've completed all that before, then our meeting will conclude. But the budget is a timed item for 7 o'clock. So without further ado, we'll move into planning items. Municipal planning strategy to enable concurrent land use bylaw and development agreement for 25 Queen Street. And I see we have Ms. Childs is going to run us through this presentation.
You. Just gonna make sure that works. Yeah, so this application is for municipal planning strategy amendments to enable concurrent land use bylaw amendments and a development agreement at 25 Queen Street. So there are 3 parts to the application. The first is to redesignate the property, 25 Queen Street, from medium density residential to high density residential. Rezone from the downtown residential or R4 zone to the high density residential or R6 zone, and also to enter into a development agreement to permit 30 units. So I'll discuss this more later, but the rezoning can't happen without a redesignation because the proposed zone is not within the current designation. So the first step of this application is for council to determine if they would like to entertain a redesignation of the property from medium density residential to high density residential. So I just wanted to break down a few of the processes and terms within this application. It's a little bit convoluted. So a designation is a designated area of land showing how council envisions the area to develop, and it's shown on the future land use map, which is a policy in our municipal planning strategy. A zone is a designated area of land showing current permitted uses, and that's shown in the land use bylaw in the zoning map. And then a development agreement is the legal document that permits uses additional to as of right in the zone. So the subject property is 25 Queen Street. It's located where the star is there. It's in the block between Phoenix Street and Dominion Street. The property is just under 35,000 square feet and used to be the location of the Fairview Inn, which burned down in 2011, and it's been vacant since. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the development proposal at this stage, since the focus of the first step is the policy change to enable the proposed development. So the property is currently zoned downtown residential, or R4, and is designated medium density residential. And the applicant is proposing a rezoning to high density residential, and to do that, a redesignation to high density residential. So there's a lot on this chart, but it outlines the uses permitted as of right, by site plan, and by development agreement. And it shows the 2 zones that are within the medium density residential designation, which is the current designation, so it's those first kind of two columns, and the one zone that is in the high-density residential designation, which is the proposed designation. So I'll just point out that the two zones, those first two columns in the medium-density residential designation, are very similar. They permit single unit, 2-unit as of right, home-based businesses, and the rest is the same as well. The only difference is the permission of a multi-unit dwellings up to 4 units in one zone, whereas it's converting some existing residential dwelling units to 4 units in the other zone. And then you can also see that there are some major differences between the two designations. So as of right, in the high-density designation, and the zone, it permits residential development up to 10 units per acre, between 11 and 20 residential units per acre by site plan, and then multi-unit residential between 21 and 30 units per acre by development agreement. So there's some major differences between the medium density and the high density. This chart shows what is permitted in different situations on the specific lot, so on 25 Queen Street. So the first situation is the existing lot. Another situation is the existing lot, but subdivided into 3 lots, and that can be done based on the size of the property and the frontage area. And neither of these options require a redesignation through a policy change. They could just be done without that policy change. And this situation, the second situation, the subdivision was done to see what the maximum units permitted as of right could be on that lot. And then that third option or situation is what is being proposed in the application. So for that, a redesignation is required. So if a development agreement was done and the affordable housing bonus was used to try and get as many units as possible, the current lot could have 14 units as it is right now. But if a redesignation and a rezoning were done, then a DA or development agreement could be done and the affordable housing bonus could be done. Then the site could actually accommodate 30 units, and that what is being proposed right now. So there's also a big jump in what could be permitted on that property if a redesignation was done. So this proposal is for a 30-unit dwelling. It's not currently permitted on the property within the current land use regulations. So as I've mentioned, in order to consider that 30-unit building at this location, a redesignation would have to happen, and that's done on the future land use map, and an excerpt is shown on the screen of that. And so that redesignation would enable consideration of a rezoning to a higher density zone, and then consideration of a development agreement to permit the maximum number of units. And so as shown on this excerpt from the future land use map, this property is designated as medium density residential, and there's a few different designations surrounding it as well. And if council decides not to proceed with the policy amendment to redesignate the property, it will remain designated as medium density residential and will retain the current downtown residential or R4 zoning. So looking at compliance with policy, the purpose of the municipal planning strategy, as set out by the Municipal Government Act, is to provide a statement of policy to guide the development of the municipality. And the MGA further states that a municipality shall not act in a manner that is inconsistent with the MPS or municipal planning strategy, and that the land use bylaw shall enable the policies of the municipal planning strategy. So municipal planning strategy policies are reviewed for any development application to determine if it is compliant. Some policy is reviewed specifically for development agreements and land use bylaw amendments, such as policy IM6. So this was looked at, for this application. It looks at compatibility of the development, servicing, transportation, and the environment. The municipal planning strategy has policies that support densification in strategic areas, but other policy that outlines the importance of keeping the development in line with infrastructure. After a preliminary review of the proposed application, staff believe that the existing infrastructure in the area is likely insufficient for the proposed development. And prior to a full review, council needs to determine if they would like to entertain a change in policy, the redesignation, as that would enable the proposed development. So there are a few aspects of infrastructure that are showing limitations. The town is facing wastewater infrastructure capacity deficiencies, which is an important consideration when weighing a change to current policy through redesignation, especially when the proposed development is not currently permitted in the current designation, and the redesignation would permit an increase in residential units. As with other developments permitted through development agreement, wastewater offsetting would be required, However, existing sewer infrastructure on Queen Street doesn't meet current standards, and a preliminary analysis indicated that there is insufficient capacity in the sewer shed. It's anticipated that separate from wastewater offsetting measures, infrastructure upgrades would probably be required. There's also no available storm infrastructure on Queen Street, and the water infrastructure doesn't meet the current standards. It's expected that there's insufficient fire protection for a 30-unit development on that property. And again, it's expected that infrastructure upgrades would be required. The anticipated infrastructure upgrades are based on initial review and the proposed development. It's an option that the developer could upgrade the infrastructure at their cost. However, the applicant is requesting a cost-sharing agreement with council. There are no plans within the current 10-year capital budget for infrastructure upgrades for Queen Street in the area of the proposed development. The developer has proposed two options for a cost-sharing agreement. Option A is that the applicant contributes 20% of the cost and the town contributes 80% of the cost. Option B is that the applicant contributes 50% of the cost and the town contributes 50% of the cost. Additionally, the property owner would be looking to not pay property taxes for 10 years. However, with this option, there's no legal mechanism by which town council could enter into such an agreement unless the developer is a nonprofit organization providing a service to the community or in accordance with a commercial phase-in bylaw, but the town does not have one. So the following are some considerations regarding this proposal. Council has given direction to keep development in line with infrastructure capacity. If policy was changed, but this specific development was not actually completed, so the 30 units was not built, higher density would still be permitted by development agreement on this property because a policy change was enabled. Wastewater offsetting is currently the practice through a development agreement, but with conversations around wastewater betterment charges happening, that could change things. If charges are implemented, a wastewater study wouldn't be required anymore. Then the true cost of wastewater may not be captured with charges, and also infrastructure improvements may still be required based on general capacity. The location of the high density or R6 properties needs to be assessed, and it's recommended that this is completed during the planning document review rather than having a standalone or handling a standalone property at this time. And I wanted to note as well that similar sized buildings or higher density buildings are being permitted in town. However, they're already permitted in policy. They've been permitted through development agreements, which is possible to do because it's permitted through the existing zone or the current designation that those properties are in. And as mentioned, a redesignation is a policy change, and with a policy change, there's no opportunity to appeal the decision. So that's either for the applicant if council does not move forward, or for the public if council does move forward. So the decision required from council at this stage is if council is interested in changing the policy and initiating the application for the redesignation, which would subsequently permit the rezoning and development agreement. So it's recommended that council refuse to initiate the application for a policy change based on the following. The policy change to redesignate the property is not supported in current policy. Current wastewater infrastructure does not support the proposed development. Any requests for increased density, or what we're calling upzoning, should not be done in isolation prior to the planning document review. Considerable wastewater upgrades would be required to enable the proposed development. The wastewater upgrades are not included within the 10-year capital budget. And also the estimated cost of the upgrades is a high-level estimate, and there is a request to cost share. So if council chooses to initiate this application, it doesn't mean that council is approving the requested policy change, it's just starting the process, and a full review of an analysis of the proposal would be carried out in addition to public consultation, and staff would then bring forward a planning analysis report and continue with the regular process.
Thank you. There's a lot in there. Questions from council? Off the top, anybody? Councillor Thorburn?
Not really a question, a comment. She was saying about not enough water for fire protection. Well, it's Saturday night that it burned. I was the first one on scene. There was ample water around it for the fire. It was fully involved at 25 Queen Street.
This would be a larger footprint than the Fairview Inn was.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that night.
Oh, yeah.
Just a comment. It's not a...
So for as of right development, there is
Right.
enough. Is what
Yeah.
Okay. Now I get what you're saying. Other questions? Councillor Caldwell.
So there are no plans in the 10-year plan to address the infrastructure needs in that area. What would prevent us from, say, moving up, addressing the needs in that area and bumping something further back?
Council could always do that. So there are infrastructure fixes that could happen, and that's where the cost sharing would come into play. So the estimate that was included in the report would be what it would potentially cost to do those upgrades in that area. So that would have to be a council decision to change that.
Mhm. And we'd have to consult with our Director of Engineering to make sure that the upgrades to that didn't prompt any upgrades further down that we weren't ready to trigger. So it would have to be analyzed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Councillor McDonald.
Just for perspective, there are, I believe there's a couple of high-density properties on the corner of Dominion and Queen. Do you have an idea of how many units are in some of those buildings? I think there's 3.
Yeah, I
any
don't
idea?
know off the top of my head. That's what I thought. Yeah,
So about
and their
half.
Dominion is a bit different for infrastructure as well.
Right, right.
But yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I was just
not
getting
quite.
a perspective of size and,
Yeah.
okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
Other questions? My concern with this would be setting a precedent where the taxpayer is funding the upgrades required for a for-profit development. So the town doesn't generally use taxpayer money to facilitate a development that is for profit. And I'm worried that that would set a precedent where every developer that came to the town would say, this person only had to pay 50% of this, so I only want to pay 50% of this. And I'm worried about what that would mean. We're gonna be dealing with a budget tonight that has massive capital expenditures, just to keep us in line with the federal mandates for wastewater, and that's without taking on the additional burden of paying for infrastructure that, in my opinion, should be paid for by the developer. Other questions or comments? Councillor Thorburn.
Not, just a question. They were going to give some affordable units, bonus density. Would that be 6 units then, take you from 24 to 26 if that went through?
I didn't fully hear, but I think
Bonus density, how many units, did that add the extra 6 to make it 30
yeah.
versus 24?
yeah.
Okay, no, good.
No,
Thank
that's a
you.
good question, though. Other comments? Questions? What is the will of council? Councillor McDonald.
I would move the town council for the town of Bridgewater refuse the requested amendment to the municipal planning strategy to redesignate the property at 25 Queen Street at this time and maintain the existing medium-density designation.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is non-substantive development agreement amendment for 141 LaHave Street. So council will recall this came before council a few months ago. And so this is back, and I see Mr. Nolan is here to run us through this one.
Good evening. So I believe that Nick came to council on November 23rd of 2020, and he brought forward several recommendations for to address the violations to the development agreement. So I'm just going to provide a little bit of background, a description of the existing development agreement, and the recommendation of the non-substantive change. So staff received an application from Richard Kenneth Nickel on February 3rd of this year to amend the development agreement for 141 LaHave Street to remove the maximum width requirement for the side access points, which would require a change to subsection 6 of section B of the development agreement. And this is based on a town council resolution to defer the decision regarding the development agreement violation at this address until staff provide a report outlining options for a non-substantive amendment for a future meeting of council. So in 2017, Richard Nickel applied for a development agreement for the construction of an additional 1,000 square feet, roughly, to the existing garage at the site. And there was a series of inspections done in 2019 by the development officer, and several violations were noted, one of which was the site access point width, that no more than 2 site access points be permitted, and that there be separation between parking and the public sidewalk. So staff initiated a number of discussions with the property owner in order to gain compliance. Those discussions weren't successful, and so then the development officer then initiated a policy-directed correspondence to address the violations. In that process, some of the violations were remedied. However, there were a number of violations that remained, and so staff brought forward to council the recommendation on November 23rd. And the recommendation at the time was for council to direct staff to undertake the required work to remedy the outstanding development agreement violation at the expense of the property owner, which was estimated to be about $2,500. Council, however, directed staff to accept the continuing violations and require a non-substantive amendment to the development agreement. The proposed non-substantive amendment is to remove the maximum width requirement for site access points, which is currently 9 meters. And the reason why that site access width maximum was recommended is really due to the potential pedestrian conflict that having a really large driveway creates. It creates a larger turning radius, which increases the speed of the driver and just creates some visibility issues for pedestrians. The existing access point that is in non-compliance is about 55 feet in width, which is pretty substantially bigger by about 25 feet than the width that was in the development agreement. But it does now, having no maximum width requirement, does align with the design standards for vehicle parking areas for the industrial zone, which this property is currently zoned. And so, yeah, so the requested amendment is non-substantive, meaning a resolution of council is required, provided council determines the changes do not significantly alter the intended effect of the agreement. So the recommendation is for Town Council of the Town of Bridgewater to amend the existing development agreement for the property to remove the maximum width requirements on the site.
Thank you. Any questions? Councilor Thorburn.
Maybe I should declare conflict of interest. I did the night that this went through because my son-in-law works there, and I just sneaked back up here.
Perfect, thank you. Appreciate that. Deputy Mayor.
So where do we stand with 12C in that violation?
I think that is a continuing violation that we're not requesting be addressed. As part of this non-substantive amendment, I think Nick would be a better person to answer that question, but I'm not, yeah. He's not currently present, but yeah.
Can I ask?
Yep.
Maybe you can't answer this, and I apologize. So what are the repercussions of this continued violation of 12C?
So, I mean, the continued repercussions would just be that the site access point, remains extremely wide. And so I think, the conflict is that on LaHave Street, there is quite a lot of pedestrian activity compared to other industrial areas. And so, in other industrial areas, you wouldn't have this maximum requirement, but that may not have as big of an impact because there's just not as many pedestrians. But because this is on LaHave Street, there may be a potential for more conflict between drivers and vehicles. I think that would be the greatest conflict.
And the staff report does note that, 12C required that separation between the parking space and the sidewalk, and there were those little boxes put there, that the development officer completed an inspection and felt that Section 12 was complied with satisfactorily, so. He's made that determination that it's been completed.
Yeah, but I guess there's nothing there.
Maybe that was
So-
taken out for snow removal, but we may have to follow up and ensure it goes back in. Yeah,
That's exactly right.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, I'm way off topic on this one, obviously, but should it be taken out for snow removal? Wouldn't you want that kind of barrier in place during winter storms and winter conditions and so
I
on?
think it might be that the nature of the box might not be so conducive to withstanding the plow, perhaps, because it's not a concrete or stone.
Yeah.
It's
No, I get
plastic,
it.
I believe,
Okay.
but, yeah. So the quality of it might be different.
Councillor McDonald.
So have we now created a situation where we have to go every year and check to make sure that they've been replaced?
We would have to ensure that they were put back in, because that is the intent of the development agreement, yeah.
And there was no requirements for it being permanent? The wording wasn't
I
saying
don't
that.
think
It actually says non-permanent.
Oh,
Non-
right,
Yeah.
it does, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
My concern is similar to yours. So it does say non-permanent planter boxes, but that's all they are, is non-permanent planter boxes. They're empty planter boxes. I recall last summer not seeing any greenery in them, and I think certainly the spirit of the DA was that there be some greenery. I mean, it does say sidewalk by a landscape strip or island that contains shrubs or other landscape treatments to effectively delineate parking, yada, yada, yada. So I don't think that 12C is accomplished with just the planter box. I think it has to contain the actual plants. So I would hope that this year perhaps when we go back to make sure that they go back after snow plowing season, which is, I'm hoping it's done. I hope when we go back, just to make sure that they're putting them back, that they put something in them. Someone commented the other day, it looked like washer toss boxes. So the plants make it look less like that.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what you were also working towards there with some greenery in there. Any other comments, questions? Someone prepared to make a motion? Yes, please, thank you.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater amend the existing development agreement for the property located at 141 LaHave Street to remove the maximum width requirement for site access points by removing subsection B from section 6 of the development agreement.
Seconded by Councilor Vergier. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor? Those opposed, motion is carried. Thank you. Well, welcome Councilor Thorburn back. As we move on to, we have a couple pieces of correspondence for information. The first one is from the Community Health Board, South Shore, regarding affordable housing, asking us to work with our neighbors, our municipal neighbors, which I believe we have on the agenda for the next mayor's and wardens meeting, is to discuss affordable housing. So that's on Wednesday, so that topic will come up. So that's there for council's information. As well as a letter from the Minister of Municipal Affairs stating that the province has essentially refunded us for the 911 cost recovery fund and given that money back to us, I guess as part of the COVID.
It's an annual grant.
It's an annual grant,
Yeah.
but is it always
Yep.
the full amount?
Yep.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good. So that's there. Down to reports and recommendations. You've got Lunenburg County Senior Safety Program monthly report for March. Those who were on the Police Commission at the last meeting would have had quite a in-depth presentation from that team. It was very informative. It's amazing how resourceful they are, helping people stay in their homes, and it actually would be a very good presentation to receive at council. I just found it eye-opening what they do, and they have a little pot of money and they're able to literally keep people in their homes with that. So that's great. Our next item, 10.2, is we're giving notice for amendments to policy 77, which is grants to organizations. So as we know, when we give notice, it's just letting the public know that at the next council meeting, we will be discussing this topic. Is someone prepared to make the motion? Councillor Bergier?
Yes, Your Worship. That Town Council for the Town of Bridgewater give notice pursuant to Section 48 of the Municipal Government Act that at the April 26, 2021 council meeting, amendments to Policy 77, grants to organization, will be considered to enable consideration of time-sensitive applications outside of the 2 intake periods defined in the policy.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Any discussion? Again, we're going to discuss this in 2 weeks. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Our next item is Asset Management Grant Application Resolution.
So as the council is aware, in our capital budget, we have some funds proposed for asset management. And one of the things that we are doing is applying for a grant through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities through their municipal asset management program. So they require that council pass a resolution to support the submission of the application and commit to the work that we say we will do within that application. So the gas tax agreement is where the requirement for asset management comes from. And it requires that municipalities take steps or strides towards asset management. Some provinces are they leave that with the province to work with municipalities to do. And in Nova Scotia, we have to take strides towards that. And so some municipalities are well on their way, and some municipalities are really just starting. And one of the requirements that we have to do is take an asset management readiness profile test that FCM has in order to be eligible for their funding through this program. And so that kind of, you go through that, it's attached to the report, and it tells you where you kind of shake out at the end of it. And we're really at the beginning stages, even though we collect data on our assets, like our sewer and our water and roads. We're really just at the beginning stages. So it's important to do the asset management because it's in recognition that your services are reliant on those assets. If those assets deteriorate, you don't invest in them or maintain them, it impacts the services and the service levels you provide. An example of that is just sidewalks. And if you don't maintain them, then that service that you provide is impacted. So the FCM has lots of resources on asset management to guide municipalities on how to approach it. So they have a recommended approach where you do your foundational piece first. And your foundational piece is about establishing the policy. Why does council want to do it? How do they want to use it? And it provides direction to staff. And then there's the development of the strategy. So the strategy will set out what we want to do and when. So there's tons of assets, right? It's just not roads, sewer, sidewalks. There's IT, there's buildings, there's parks. It's quite an undertaking. So we set out our performance targets, who's going to do it, when, and what risk and mitigative measures we'll undertake. So that in that phase, we'd explore software and what type of software program would work best for our needs and those types of things. And then the next phase is the operational strategy. So now that we've said how we're going to do it, when we're going to do it, and who, then it's let's do it. So that's where you create your plans. And that's where you look at what you're going to capture on your data, what your service levels are going to be, your life cycle management strategies, and your financial strategies that go along with that. And then that influences your operational plans and strategies. So they have this two-phased approach. So it's not just let's just jump in there and start collecting data, because we really have to know why and what we're collecting, make sure that we're collecting the right things, make sure we're using the right software, and it all kind of feeds into that integrated approach. So that's why they say you need to do those two steps. So the application that we're submitting is for phase 1. And that would be to receive some funding to help offset our costs to complete phase 1. And that's per the asset management readiness profile that we completed that really says that's where we are. And therefore what we're proposing is that that's what the application would be for, and in this phase we would do some organizational training and awareness. So that would be both for both council and staff, so that everyone understands what it is and the approach that you would take to do that. Then it would be to develop that policy, so that council wouldn't be blindly asked to develop an asset management policy without having that training and background as well. And then we would develop the strategy. So there's 65,000 in the budget to do this. And if the FCM grant we're successful in getting that, that will reduce the amount that we're required to fund. So we would use that to offset that, or we may decide to come to council and say, let's just do a little bit more than we planned, if we're able to do that with the funds. That's there. And it's important to note that Phase 2 is also a significant amount of work, because it's about capturing that data. And so that will require additional resources. And that'll be part of when we develop our strategy. We'll identify how we go about doing that and what that will look like. So the recommendation is that council authorize the submission of the application under the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Asset Management Program for Phase 1 of the Asset Management Program, and that council commit to conducting those activities outlined, which are your foundational pieces.
Any questions of the CAO? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Fagier?
Yes.
Thank you.
That council for the town of Bridgewater direct staff to apply for a grant opportunity from the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Asset Management Program for Phase 1 Asset Management Program, and further, that council commits to conducting the following activities in its proposed project submitted to the Federation of Canadian Municipalities Municipal Asset Management Program to advance our asset management program. 1, increasing organizational training and awareness of asset management. 2, the development of an asset management policy. And 3, the development of an asset management strategy.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Thorburn. Further discussion?
Question.
That is the most times you could say asset management in one motion.
I know.
All right, question's been called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Down to business arising and unfinished business. We have the application, Chapter 184 tax exemption. We had a notice of motion given at March 22nd council meeting for a partial repeal. And so that is now before council. Just one little note, it refers to repealing motion 21-252, but it should be 21-005. Just for whoever is going to make that motion. So we've discussed this and brought it forward to this meeting, so this shouldn't be a surprise for anyone. Is someone prepared to make that motion? Again, referring to document 21-005. Councillor Fagier?
Yes.
Thank you.
That council for the town of Bridgewater partially repeal to remove repeal motion 21-005 to remove the text 629 and.
Perfect. Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Caldwell. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried.
You have to do the other two.
Oh, sorry. There's another one in there too?
It's in the document.
Okay, sorry. Didn't.
So yeah, now that you've done the repeal of the removal of 629, that brings it back, that you can reconsider, or you can consider whether or not you wish to include that within the Chapter 184 tax exemption for nonprofit organizations. And if you do, you are required to conduct first reading of the same. And then second reading would be contingent. It's being recommended that second reading would be contingent upon occupancy of the building for the intended use by May 1st, 2021. So if that motion passes and then you do second reading by May 1st, or before May 1st, we would ensure that it was occupied prior to granting that.
Okay, so any questions? It gets confusing when you have 629 and 641
I know.
King and trying to
Yeah.
remember.
So 629 is
which.
on the corner.
Right.
Yeah.
So we need a motion to grant the tax exemption.
To give notice of
Just-
intention, to to amend.
Okay. Someone prepared to make that motion? Giving notice to,
So if you refresh.
if you refresh your e-scribe, the motion will give a little clarity there. So this would be to give notice of our intention for the addition of 629 King. Deputy Mayor Tanner?
I move that council give notice of its intention to approve the addition of 629 King Street to the Chapter 184 tax exemptions for nonprofit organizations bylaw, Schedule A, full tax exemption for the entire property, and as shown in Appendix A of Document 20-213A, and that council hereby conducts first reading of the same with second reading contingent upon occupancy of the building for the intended use by May 1st, 2021.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Thorburn, discussion? I just have a question. So it's contingent on occupancy May 1st. It does look like they're working towards that. But like if they're in May 2nd, it doesn't throw the whole thing, the baby out with the bathwater, does it? Or is it that
I would
hard?
say that we would be coming back, if it's not occupied by the council meeting right after that, then we'd be coming back and getting direction from council.
Like I don't want to
Yeah.
push the date
Which I
all the way
think
down,
is,
but I was just wondering if it would require a whole new set of readings
Yeah.
if they missed it.
So May 10th is the next meeting, and yeah, so we would be reporting back. If it wasn't occupied, we'd be reporting to the May 10th
Okay.
meeting to get direction as to whether or not you want to extend that. The whole idea is that, it's before the tax bills go out, and the tax
Yeah.
bills are going to be going out, if they may be out by then. So,
Well, and that's the risk. If
Yeah.
they're not in, then
Yeah.
they might get a tax
Yeah.
bill. Okay.
Yeah.
We have a mover and a seconder. Any further questions or comments? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Our next item, 11.2.
One more.
One more?
So that's to do with 641. So you had
That was
agreed
629,
not to
that
put it on the tax exemption schedule, but they since revised their request to ask you to promise that you would give them a tax exemption once they were occupied, and they had various components that they wanted that tax exemption to apply for. And the recommendation of staff is that the tax exemption bylaw does not allow you to promise to give a future tax exemption. You consider the application at the time. And there's lots of factors that would influence whether or not it qualified at the time. So you'd be kind of blindly making a promise that a bylaw doesn't allow you to do. So the suggestion was that council write a letter of endorsement for the project so that when they're applying for funds, the funders know that, and note that you'd be willing to consider a request at the appropriate time.
Okay, so
And if you hit refresh again, that motion will be there.
are there any questions on that one? That one's pretty, I think the timeline for that project is quite a ways out, so hopefully that will come back to council at some point. What's the will of council here? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor McDonald?
I would move that council not grant the request for the promise of tax exemption at 641 King Street. Rather, council write a letter of endorsement for the project and note its willingness to consider a request for property tax exemption at the appropriate time.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Conklin. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. Is that it for motions?
That's it.
Our next item is the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission comments submission. So, as everyone's aware, that commission is ongoing. So this is for council to direct myself to submit comments. Do we have, I know there's a document here, a staff
Yeah.
speaking to
Jessica
it?
prepared that, yeah.
While we're waiting for our director to come down, I will note that back in December 8th, I received a letter from then Minister Chuck Porter, who was the Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, that assured me that Mr. Stephen Richard, who will be coordinating the engagement with the commission, will be keeping us informed. I've not heard from Mr. Richard or anyone connected to the commission other than the same basic notification that everyone got, that you can submit your comments. So I'm very disappointed that it was just kind of I forwarded your name and nothing happened. So I'll reach out to the new minister and express my frustration.
Yeah, so council requested that we sort of draft a letter to be submitted on behalf of the town. So this report sort of outlines that, as the mayor said, the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission is leading an engagement process right now. I believe opportunity to provide comments closes this week, tomorrow perhaps, tomorrow or the end of this week. And actually they've just conducted a series of workshops around the province, and both Nelson and myself attended the one for Lunenburg Queens that was held last Friday. There were lots of various participants from across the region at that session, and apparently they said it was perhaps the most well-attended session of the 5 or 6 that they had from across the province. Councillor Colwell, you were on that as well. That's all that I could see from scrolling through the many, many names, but I did notice you were there as well, which was a good discussion. We were all 3 of us, I believe, in different breakout rooms for that discussion, so I know ours was quite engaging. And we had opportunity, certainly in my group, to sort of reflect on the comments that we have here, and we've included in the draft letter. So we attached to this report is a letter, but key suggestions for consideration that we put forward are about funding available to projects across all communities, and for the province to work with municipalities to identify opportunities or willing new developers for the various programs. We included something around funding for retrofitting and repairing older housing stock that would go a long way towards ensuring housing meets basic standards. I know a lot of the discussion is focused on building new affordable housing, and there was certainly a bit of a missing piece around ensuring existing housing remains affordable as well. Enabling municipalities to partner with a broader range of partners to provide affordable housing. So right now, the Municipal Government Act limits us to only being able to partner with nonprofit organizations or companies or organizations that have a partnership with a nonprofit or with the provincial government, not someone who wants to provide affordable housing that doesn't meet that test. And to amend Section 71C of the Municipal Government Act to allow both commercial and residential value of a mixed-use commercial residential development to be phased in. We also, and it certainly was a theme in the workshop discussions that I was a part of around housing rental data, and that was certainly something we talked about when we spoke with you at the discussion session on March 1st, that the actual access to data in our community and in our region around housing affordability just really isn't there, isn't collected, and isn't shared if it is. So we would like to see more data. And in particular, PBSC collects data annually, but it's not provided to us. So to make that perhaps an annual report that all municipal units could have access to. And to develop mechanisms to support enforcement of affordable rents by municipalities. So, you know, if we have something in our development agreement, if we're doing a bonus agreement for additional density, we need assistance because that data isn't there. How do we ensure that those rents are remaining affordable, and how do we help enforce that? And we also said, you know, it'd be great if they developed a policy toolkit that provides guidance and understanding of the full scope of municipal powers when it comes to the provision of affordable housing. You'll note in the draft letter that is included there, it's addressed to the 2 co-chairs of the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission. So that's Dr. Ren Thomas, who's an assistant professor at the School of Planning at Dalhousie University, and Mr. Aaron Devereaux, who is the Deputy Minister for the new Department of Infrastructure and Housing. And one important thing that we put in the beginning of the letter, I think I was hearing your voice in my head, Mayor Mitchell, but that the town of Bridgewater has full responsibility for the provision of key infrastructure such as water, sewer, streets, policing, in addition to all other municipal services that our residents need to live full and healthy lives. We're not in a financial position to provide funding, give up development fees, or waive taxes owing. 1 cent of our tax rate generates only $70,000, and we have a $55 million wastewater deficit. Yet affordable housing is a key issue that we face, and we're willing to explore and consider all options we can to make our community better for our residents, especially those most vulnerable. But it's really, we have a lot to weigh here, and so we wanted to make sure that that was was part of the narrative, and that housing affordability is an issue and one of an increasing size in our community. So the letter outlines all of those options that we're putting forward for suggesting get put forward for consideration. If there's anything else that we've missed in this letter, we would happily revise the draft. The recommendation is that council request the mayor send it off. Any questions?
Questions, Councillor Caldwell?
I thought the letter is very well thought out, very well written, but the former editor in me must point out a spelling error in the opening paragraph.
Nelson, I tried hard.
Okay.
Please do.
Can you pass that
along to myself
pass
and
that along,
Nelson.
yeah. Sandra knows I'm not going to catch it, so.
When you look at something too many times, you stop seeing these mistakes. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Other questions? The one I find frustrating is that PBSC collects data. PBSC is funded by municipalities, and yet they don't give us the data that we're funding them to gather. So that's a bit of a miss that I think we should be raising.
They give it when asked. Nelson made the request, and we received the information very promptly.
It should be part
but
of,
it's
as you said,
not
an annual report.
annual provision. It's not. We didn't know until it was pointed out by the director of finance that they might have that type of information.
Well, and I find it very easy for, if you don't have it in front of you, it's easy to just say, well, I didn't know. But if you provide it in a report, then everyone knows. Then you start removing that excuse of I didn't know. So hopefully they'll receive that well and hear that. Any other questions on that? Is someone prepared to make a motion? Councilor Thorburn, thank you.
I would move that council for the town of Bridgewater direct the mayor to submit comments to the Nova Scotia Affordable Housing Commission, provide an overview of the challenges our community is experiencing, and suggestions for consideration to improve the ability of municipalities to address affordable housing issues within their communities in a manner similar to the draft contained in document 20-215D.
Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Bergier should beat you to it. Sorry, Councillor Caldwell. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And our last item before we go into budget deliberations is Bridgewater Farmers Market Association request for lease space at the former Bridgewater Memorial Arena. So excited that their market will be returning for the 2021 season. So we'll turn it over to our new Economic Development Officer. Welcome in person, Mr. Powell.
Nice to see you all. You look better in person than you do on screen. So nice to see you. I just noticed one mistake here. First is that the submission date for this report says April 7th, 2020. And you can see in the document notation it's actually April 7th, 2021. So I just want to point that out. This is, however, very similar to the application that was approved by Council in May 14th in 2020. There are some variances here that I can point out to you, but the intention is the same, is that the Bridgewater Farmers Market wants to lease space in the Memorial Arena to continue to provide their product. What the difference is now, because of the difference in the standards in terms of COVID-19, is they can actually, in addition to online ordering and packing and pickup, now they can also be allowed to do in-person purchases, both inside and outside the building. Another variance in here as well is also that the amount that they want to offer for the leasing is this year is $1,000, and they're also willing to pick up at their own expense some of the improvements to the facility to allow for electric plug-in for the vendor stands. I did get a copy of the map that they have proposed in terms of the space that they will use. It's the same as last year, and that's also in the report itself. And I think overall the interest here is to, I think this is interest is to allow it to continue as an example of how the space can be used well, and I think it is an opportunity for to improve opportunities for supporting local businesses. The other things we need to consider, though, is that on March 1st, 2021, the council discussion had a budget meeting of the $115,000 that was presented in the report in terms of the other work that has to be made to the roof and so forth of the property in mind. But I think also that the farmers market has been volunteered to pick up the cost that they are directly responsible for in terms of the electrical plug-in, which I previously mentioned. So the options here are to approve the use of the space and to proceed with the facility usage agreement, or to be executed with their modifications to the agreement itself, or deny the request, or come back for further information.
Thank you. Questions from members of council? Councillor Caldwell?
How do we determine what a reasonable lease rate is for that space?
We haven't had an appraisal done to do that. So this is, last year they paid $500 for the season plus, and that was for actually upfitting some of the space, and that was it. And then during the Christmas market, they paid $100 each day, so $500 again. So that's where the thousands coming from. And it's mainly just based on their affordability to pay. So we haven't gone out and said they're nonprofit, so that's the other part of this. We are able to lease at less than market, but we haven't gone out and got market rates for leasing the space. It was more, last year it was because of COVID-19, it was too small down the town center parking lot, because they used to use that from the town and just basically pay for the electrical, so $125 or $130 for the season. And they moved up to the Bridgewater Memorial Arena because they needed a place to do indoor packing. So it was more to support the farmers market during that. And then they determined that it's actually a great site for their market activity, and they wanted to continue this year. Now, it's recognized that as we move towards next year's phase, if council decides to do more permanent type renovations to the building, that of course we'd have to look at lease rates and everything at that point, because they'd become more of a permanent home for the farmers market.
Other questions or comments? Councillor Bergier?
Just a question about the hours. It says opening hours are 10 a.m. to 3. I'm just wondering if they're expanding their hours. Was it till
that's
noon
later,
before?
going later as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I'm not too sure. I know they want it 10 for setup purposes. Maybe 3 is just to allow that extra bit of time for takedown. And
Because it says
Yeah.
use will be from 8 a.m. to 5, but the opening hours are 10 till 3. So,
So that is later, because I think before
Yeah.
they were 12:30 or 1.
Yeah.
and I see the $1,000 does include their cost of electricity.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, and that's about, as I say, that's about equal to what last year
Okay.
was, yeah.
Other questions? Deputy Mayor?
Mark, you note that they're going to pay for the installation of an electric plug. Then later down the document says L&B will install an electric plug for the Airstream plus plugs, plural, for the use of other vendors. Are they covering all that work by L&B?
My understanding is they're covering the cost of the electrical plug. I think the other way to look at it, they're going to cover the cost of the electrical plug that will allow for the powering of the Airstream and the other vendors.
Okay.
Yes.
So that sounds like all of them.
Yep.
Yeah, isn't the Airstream typically a 220 amp?
It would be.
Okay.
I have no idea, but L&B Electric is going to do it.
Yeah, I think that's what it was.
Yeah, they're
down
covering
at-
that
down
work.
at,
Okay,
Kingsford
fair enough.
side,
I just
yeah.
make sure. Okay.
Councillor Thorburn?
I think we was hoping at one point in time that this would be a year-round operation, not just a seasonal operation, to make it more beneficial to our Bridgewater Memorial Arena. So
Mhm.
hopefully maybe sometime it will go year-round.
Yeah.
That's my only comment.
Any other comments? Someone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Caldwell.
I move that council for the town of Bridgewater direct staff to prepare and execute a facility usage agreement to enable Bridgewater Farmers Market Association to use space within the former Bridgewater Memorial Arena for the 2021 season for the purposes of a farmers market, with the terms of the agreement to be generally consistent with the terms outlined in document 21-043.
Thank you. Seconded by everyone. Councillor Thorburn. Any further discussion?
Question.
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm excited. It worked really well up there last year during COVID, so look forward to it this year. It is now 7 o'clock, so we'll move into our budget deliberations. So we'll jump right in, turn it over to the CAO, and begin the 2021-22 budget.
I'll just rejoin, I think, maybe. Okay. So, council's had a few meetings to review the 2021-22 budget. We started in early in the calendar year in February, late January, February, looking at our capital budget. And just over the past few weeks, we've been looking at our operating budget. So what we have for you tonight is just a quick highlight of the operating budget with all the changes that have been discussed, and those will be highlighted for you. So the operating budget is $22,556,394, and that is a 5.6% increase from last year. And as was pointed out during our previous discussions about comparing budget to budget, last year we did have COVID-19, so we did do some cuts in our budget. So when we're comparing our numbers, they're going to be off because, the prime example, the pool went down to $2,000, I believe it was, and it's normally a $60,000 line item, and that's back in. So there's those decreases last year that came back to our normal baseline this year that have resulted in some of that increase. And our capital budget this year is a very aggressive budget at $14,252,462. So lots of investment in infrastructure this year within our capital budget. The tax rate to support this budget is $1.75 per $100 of assessment for residential, so that's a 10-cent increase. The commercial rate will be held at last year's rate at $3.97 per $100 of assessment. And we have the LCLC special purpose tax of 6 cents per $100 of assessment as well. The wastewater rate will have an increase of 15%, and this is part of council's direction to transition to a user-based wastewater rate. We'll see a strategy to move that towards a consumption rate this year and implement it next year. So for this year, we're just increasing the rate, and the increased revenue will go into reserve. And we have a significant amount of capital that is required over the next 10 to 20 years in our wastewater, to invest in our wastewater infrastructure to meet federal guidelines. So everything we can put in reserve can help lessen what we have to borrow and help us fund those as we go along. So the residential wastewater rate will be $464.66, and the annual commercial will be $986.93. And through this budget, we have aligned council's strategic priorities with the budget, so your priorities are being implemented. In terms of what this budget will achieve with respects to community prosperity, Exit 12A interchange is a big project that we're undertaking this year, working in collaboration with the province, and it's a project that's funded. It's a $50 million project funded by the federal government, the provincial government, and the town of Bridgewater. And we'll see this year $3.2 million towards that. Our total contribution is 8.4, and again this year it's 3.2 that's going towards that. We'll be developing an economic development strategy, a marketing plan, and promotion plan as well. And this year we'll see a full year of a new service to our business community, and that's an economic development officer. And so there's new costs within our budget associated with that. Energize Bridgewater continues at $1.2 million, and this is fully funded by grants, so no impact on the tax rate there. And there's significant investments in infrastructure that's required to support growth within the town. So there's approximately $5.6 million being invested in wastewater. Road upgrades, we have $715,000 for pavement management and renewal, and there is $4.7 million wrapped up in other road and infrastructure related projects. And sidewalks, we'll be investing $200,000 into maintenance and management of sidewalks this year. In terms of placemaking and quality of life initiatives, we'll be undertaking an accessibility action plan to look at all of our facilities and our infrastructure, our services, to determine what's required to ensure we comply with the accessibility regulations. Recreation 2.0 continues to be implemented, and we have some funds in there to do that. And you'll see us looking at some online registration software and new programming initiatives. Trail improvements and maintenance are supported within the budget. There's the Bridgewater Memorial Arena, funds for the redevelopment of that. So there's $115,000 in the budget this year for some necessary repairs to the roof and walls of the structure. Park improvements will be undertaken, so there's some funds for signage and trail improvement there. We'll be completing an affordable housing needs assessment, and we have $25,000 allocated in the budget to do that. And as the mayor indicated, we'll be having some conversations about what can be done regionally there. And we have funds to support streetscape initiatives, and council recently directed that we put funds in there to support the Downtown Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation of $5,000 for some initiatives. Continuing on that theme of placemaking and quality of life, the museum, we are actually increasing the level of service at the museum this year with expanded hours of operation, and we'll continue to do community outreach through programming. The Lunenburg County Lifestyle Center continues to be funded within this budget, both their operating and capital. Transit, there's continued investment there. There's $238,000 in our operating budget that's allocated to that. And at the Bridgewater Memorial Arena, the renovations will help support that as our transit bay and facility. Community events will be undertaken this year, but it'll be a hybrid approach, with some of it being developed a little bit on the fly with COVID-19. We'll be adapting our approach again. Support for nonprofit organizations within the budget this year, we have $29,000 for grants to organizations and $100,830 for tax exemptions. So that has the same impact as a grant. We continue to invest in emergency response. Our fire budget, department budget is $1.4 million. Police protection is $3.98 million, and emergency response, which is REMO, is $26,000. We ensure fiscal responsibility. This year we'll be developing a debt management strategy, reserve policies. Our budget contributes to reserves. So there's $783,949 in the operating reserve going in, and $570,000 of that is the wastewater, and then the remainder is primarily the police reserve that we've established and fund through surplus through our criminal records checks. We'll be, at council's direction, bringing forth a betterment charges bylaw to help fund some of our wastewater capital that's prompted by development, and it will enable us to accommodate growth and development as well. And as indicated, the sewer rate will transition to a user pay model. We'll bring that strategy forward to you this year. And throughout all of this, we continue to source grants using our grant coordinator, a position that council approved in last year's budget. With respects to organizational excellence, this year is year 2 of 2 of our records management implementation. So there's funds in the budget to support buying the remainder of the software licenses for the users, and so we can see that fully implemented within the organization. Internal control measures that are being implemented at the recommendation of an internal control audit we had completed. We'll be looking at time and attendance, so there's funds in the budget for time and attendance software, and the procurement module. And we're kind of in the midst of implementing that right now. There's funds to undertake a fraud audit for the organization, and we'll be working with our auditors to do that. And there is a number of COVID-19 resilient workplace initiatives or modifications that are being undertaken to ensure that we are able to be resilient as a workplace, ensure it's safe, and comply with all the protocols of COVID-19. And that is funded through a grant that we received, a COVID-19 Restart Grant. So there's $334,000 allocated for initiatives under that. This provides you with a very high level view, the overall numbers for your operating budget. So as I indicated, it's $22.5 million. It's a 5.6% increase. You have three $3,556,886 of non-tax revenue. That will be used to help fund the budget. We're transferring $440,399 from reserve. And then you have tax revenue that will make up the difference at $558,809. So where do your tax dollars go? This is a pie chart, and it's a little hard to see from there, but you can see that some of our biggest consumers of our budget are police at, we indicated that was a 4.9. And then we go down to engineering, and that includes like roads, infrastructure, facilities. So it's a lot of infrastructure maintenance and public works that goes on there. We have mandatory contributions here, and we'll go over that in a minute, but those are things that we just get the bill for. It's not a service we provide, but we fund those. And parks and recreation is next, and wastewater, and then it goes down from there. But it just gives you kind of a picture or view of how your expenditures are broken up and what percentage is devoted to certain services. So this is a look at mandatory contributions, and of course mandatory contributions include education, which is your biggest consumer there. It looks like Pac-Man. And then you've got assessment services, corrections, senior citizens housing, and libraries. So those are all there, and I'll show you the actual numbers in a minute so you can see the increases there. And this is your revenue and how that's broken up. So as indicated, you got your tax revenue, you got your special purpose tax revenue there, sale of services that we have here. So it could be like criminal records checks, those types of things that will fit into that. We're selling our service to others. We have grants in lieu of taxes, transfers, and transfers from reserves. So this is your mandatory contribution. So this year we have an increase bill of $71,394, and you can see that that's kind of broken up amongst all of them. But the education contributions have gone up $51,000 for the town, and then the next biggest is the Regional Library Board. And we were given notice of that a year ago, that the funding model was going to change, and it would result in the town paying more for library services. So overall, a 2.9% increase in mandatory contributions to the town this year. There's some other increases within the budget as well. That would be within your baseline. So there's 700, this page just shows you 719,000 of those, but the LCLC grant is $100,000 more this year. Police services are up 31,000. The Joint Services Board, which provides our IT, our solid waste management, and our HR, is up 45, and that's primarily to do with IT. And that's to have them resourced up to meet our needs. Economic development, as I mentioned, this was something that really wasn't in the budget last year, so that's a new expense this year, so there's $129,000 more in the budget for that. Wastewater reserve, with the rate going up, we're able to put $209,000 more in our wastewater reserve. And the last two are really examples of COVID-19 cuts that we did last year. So those are up. Recreation programming is up $60,000, and the swimming pool is up $65,000, and those are really just to bring it back up to what it was pre-COVID. So in addition to looking at your baseline, which was this slide, and here's some of the things that in our core, these things went up. Nothing really new, just an increase in the cost of those services. We have additions and deletions to the baseline. So we went over those in detail in our previous meeting, so the proposal wasn't to do that again tonight unless you want to. I certainly have the slides to do that if we want to go there. But you can see that really we have 903,000 of new things in the budget, and we've taken out 719. So your adjusted baseline was 22,371, and the revised baseline, 22,371, and the revised baseline is 22,566. So we put some stuff in, we took some stuff out. And the additions are really some of the new things to what we're providing. And as I indicated, we did go through a lot of those already, but we're certainly able to go through them again if you want to do that. In terms of, from your review on April 6th and what you saw there, you did ask for some changes to the budget. So primarily, the museum had proposed that they take 2 part-time and make those 2 full-time. And rather, council said, well, what if we only granted half of that request and basically gave you another part-time equivalent that you could add to 1 or basically work out that part-time hour, however you want it. And so that reduced the request in half, so it reduced it by $22,000. And we indicated that we'd be able to keep the proposed level of service of a full round 9 to 4. And we'd be filling some of it in with existing staff, but that it could be done. So when we made that cut, to balance everything out, council then directed that we take $5,000 of that $22,000 and allocate it to the Downtown Planning Advisory Committee's recommendation that we have some money to do some downtown streetscape type initiatives, and the remainder could go to contingency, because we had reduced that contingency by $75,000, so we would put that there for some unforeseens. And along the way, Larry pointed out that there was a duplication of about $1,000 in one of the engineering additions, so we took that out while we were making the changes as well. So that's what's changed since you saw the operating expenditures. The operating reserve has changed as well, and so some of the changes there, it's in the balance primarily. So as you can, I highlighted the number for you, and what we've done there is we've added in $145,000 from transit. So we had taken $150 out last year, planning to buy buses, and we got lots of funding for those buses. So we only had to spend $5,000 of the $150, so $145 was unspent. The wastewater reserve, we approved pulling out $100,000 to fund anaerobic digester costs. That wasn't included. So we then adjusted it for that. And then the police reserve last year, the money hadn't been transferred over as of March 31st, so the balance went up by $205,000 from the police surplus last year for the criminal records checks. And then we put in the $200,000, you can see there, for this coming year, which is surplus as well. So just some changes to the balances there, to the good, as opposed, so the number's a bit higher than what you saw last time. And then in the capital reserve, we added in the $675,000 for gas tax. We indicated to you that it doubled, so we added that in, and that brought the gas tax balance up to 1.35. So that improved your capital reserves as well. And what Kim and I discussed this, and we thought that probably the best thing to do with that is we haven't got the funds yet, is as we get to the point of looking at what we may have to borrow, because we don't borrow for capital projects until they're done, right? Is when we get to that point, we can come and we can talk about, do we want to use some of that gas tax instead of borrowing for that? And you may find that some of those capital projects actually don't get completed this year to the point that we're ready to finance them. So we may end up just leaving it in reserve and using it next year. But either way, you'll use it at some point to offset financing. So your capital budget, the total number hasn't changed. So you saw this slide last meeting. We showed you the numbers as they looked in February, and then we showed you the March 29th numbers. So it was $14.25 million, and then kind of how that was all funded. The changes that we made in the capital budget overall from when you saw it in February, and then in yellow, that's the highlight for what you asked be changed at the last meeting. So we went over these capital projects already, but we pulled out the North Parkade deck of $350,000. So we're doing that parking study this year, and that'll tell us whether or not we need the parking. And council can make that decision once you see that. The railings, we also pulled that out as well, the $110,000, again, because the parking study was being done. So before you make that investment, you'll know. Wastewater treatment plant conditional assessment, we moved that out a year. So that was just to try to find some savings so that we can balance the budget within the tax revenue that we had to work with. The Bridgewater Memorial repairs, we reduced the amount in the capital because we had actually, under the COVID restart funding, some of that allocated there. So it really wasn't a cut in the project, it was just a cut in how it was funded. Culvert replacements, we pulled up the 10,000 and put it off for a year. Guardrail replacement, again, it's an annual thing we do, that we wouldn't do that this year, we put it to next year. The Public Works garage overhead doors, we had 2 in the budget, so we cut it by 10 and said, let's only do 1. Pearl Street, council at the last meeting directed that we defer this until 22-23, the paving there, simply because there's work being done on that road this year with the construction of a development there, a residential development, so you felt that let's let all the heavy equipment do all the moving it needs to do on that road before we go in and pave it. And then the energy management plan, we reduced what we'd be spending by $81,300. And then we had a bunch of capital carry forwards that we introduced into the budget that you approved at the last meeting, but those came with its own funding source, so it didn't impact the amount that you had to fund. And the things we added into the capital budget, so when we pulled out the $225,000 for Pearl Street, it was being funded through operating reserve. So you said, let's just keep the money there and do some things that you felt important. So we added $115,000 to the pavement management. So we had $400,000 in pavement management, and we added $115,000. So the total in the capital is $515,000 for pavement management. And we have $200,000 in operating, so $715,000 in total. Sidewalk management, we added $100,000 to that, and there's already 90 in there, so the total is now 190 going towards sidewalks in our capital budget. And crosswalk improvements, staff had suggested we could take that out as a cost-saving measure, and we were able to add that back in when the Pearl Street was taken out. So those are the changes to the capital budget. So you can see in the 10-year, we put Pearl Street in 22-23. So we adjusted the 10-year capital plan to accommodate that. So that's the high level of the budget. As I indicated, I do have that if you want to go through that, but it's up to council if you wish to do that. We're certainly prepared to highlight for you the changes, but we did highlight them in that other chart. So if council is prepared to approve the budget, there's a whole bunch of motions that I believe are in e-scribe, but essentially this just summarizes what those motions are going to do. And it's basically to approve the 2 budgets, how they're funded, the rates, when the interim tax bills go out, and when they're due. One thing that I would note is that your interim tax bill policy states that your interim tax bill is based on the current year's assessment plus the last tax rate set. So I believe the policy envisioned that you would be debating budget perhaps in May and June when the tax bills have already gone out. So you always use last year's tax rate. And because one wasn't set, so it was the last rate set. In this case, if council approves the budget tonight and sets the tax rate is set, and the interim tax bill can be based on the new tax rate. So what that would mean is that you would have the 10 cents spread over 2 tax bills. If you don't do it that way and we base it on last year's tax rate, then what happens is the impact of the tax rate increase goes all on one tax bill. So staff are suggesting because you have the tax rate set, you can spread that over the 2 tax bills and lessen that impact. And the motion's structured that way.
Questions of staff? We've got directors here, CEOs here. I know we've been through this a number of times, refined it down. This is your opportunity. If you have any questions before we approve the budget? Comments? Councilor Vergier.
Yeah, I'd just like to take a moment to thank our CAO, who's provided good direction with staff, and the finance department, all the senior managers who've prepared council early on, and we've had discussions to be prepared with this budget, and giving us different scenarios early on to know and prep for the tax increase, which has given council, I feel, opportunities to be out. I'll use Bridgewater as an example, but I feel that we've been prepared as councillors to address concerns for the public, and it makes us prepared, and thank staff to, when we've come back numerous times to ask for different changes, ask for different scenarios. So I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone on the staff who've made it easy on us. I know you do a lot of work behind the scenes, but made a difficult budget seem seamless with the work you do. So thank you.
Other comments? Councilor McDonald.
So setting a budget is exciting, but it's also tremendously stressful. Staff and council went into this one knowing that there would be a few very heavy pressures. COVID will weigh heavy on our budgets for many years to come, I'm sure, and on operations. Our wastewater challenges will be front and center of our budgets for many years, and we had the very exciting opportunity to build an interchange that we would have loved to have had a decade to prepare for such a huge project. We were ready and able to take on that project, thankfully, opening up some huge possibilities and potential for the town of Bridgewater for many years to come. And while those projects may not be as exciting to the residents of Bridgewater, they sure are for us, because we know that we're sowing the seeds for a lot of really exciting things to come, and for many years. Staff had a mountain to climb this year, following what has been a very trying and I'm sure very exhausting year for all of you. And once again presented us with a budget that was on target and so lean that we had trouble even fighting over it. So despite a worldwide pandemic that has crippled some communities, wastewater infrastructure issues that are challenging communities across the country, we're sitting with a budget that accommodates growth and development, tackles infrastructure issues, our environmental impacts, the health and safety and wellness of our community, both residents and staff, takes steps on one of our major concerns for residents in affordable housing, maintains and in some cases increases levels of services, and begins to build and rebuild our reserves. I think that's a pretty strong and confident position to be in at a time when the story could be very different. So thank you to staff for being amazing again, and council for working so well together. I think this was a very successful budget in a very difficult time.
Thank you, Councilor McDonald. Anyone else have anything they wish to add? Councilor Caldwell.
I would like to point out to the public that what could be perceived as a lack of debate tonight is certainly not a lack of due diligence. That tonight's the culmination of many, many weeks, months of hard work, deliberations, and meetings. And this is really just the, hopefully, approval of that whole process. And I'd just like to say I initially had a lot of reservations about a proposed tax increase. I gave a lot of thoughtful deliberation, and I will ultimately wholeheartedly support this budget, primarily as a means to improve business retention and growth, environmental protection, fiscal management, and the quality of life for our citizens, who I encourage to read this budget document for themselves online, and they can judge for themselves. And certainly also like to thank staff for all their hard work.
Thank you. Councilor Thorburn.
Just a few words. Most everything's been said, but the staff over my time on council each year has made it easier for us. They're really providing us the information before we ask the questions. I mean, they come well prepared, lots of information. It makes it easy on us. But I must be remiss and be thankful of our police chief, Scott Feener. There's a chief that went beyond and is generating revenues that allow us, in the last 2 years, to put $405,000 in reserves. And he's always looking. We never asked him, but he's always looking to try and make the police service, as cost as little as possible. So I think he deserves full credit for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Other members of council wish to? Deputy Mayor Tanner?
No, I mean, Councillor Thorburn makes a great point. I've got a couple other things to say, but kudos to the chief for doing that. I mean, we've had a very, very minor increase in policing costs, and that's to be expected year over year, but to actually put that amount of money into reserves for future needs is great. We've had a difficult budget this year. I think it's difficult, but at the same time, it's relatively easy, only because most of our money is going to wastewater and Exit 12 infrastructure. I mean, it's a shame that we've had to increase the tax rate, but at the same time, shame on us. Shame on me. We should have increased the tax rate minor increments over the last several years, and that would have eased this perhaps pain a little bit for people. I think COVID has taught us a lot, and taught us a lot about valuing our outdoor environment, and I think the infrastructure work that we're doing on sidewalks, the additional investment there, as well as the paving and trail system investment is good as well. We don't spend enough money on paving, and I think we had a bit of an argument during our last budget debate on that. Debate. Friendly debate. But at some point in time, that pain is going to come, and we just need to continue to focus on that, despite encouraging people to get out and walk and see the great town that Bridgewater is. Congratulations to staff for doing so well with trimming the budget where possible, and I know it's going to benefit our town for years to come. This investment that we're making, and I look forward to spending the additional gas money when it comes in. So there you go.
Thank you. Councilor Conklin?
With this being my first budget, I mean, it's been a bit of a learning experience for me. As mentioned earlier, hats off to our CAO, Tammy, and Kim Hopkins, our finance head, and the other department heads. They did a fantastic job in educating new counselors like myself and probably Councillor Caldwell on the different aspects of their department and how it comes into play in the overall budget process. And hearing horror stories of, I don't know if they're horror stories, but hearing stories of counselors getting into heated arguments over a number of tires at budget time or something like that. I'm very happy with how smoothly this process has gone. And anyway, thank you.
Thank you. I want to start by thanking staff. As always, they already come to council with a document that is pretty lean, and I almost envy some of these larger urban centers that we can just cut millions of dollars, and it looks like they have these big victories because look at us, we've cut millions, but the document we get is already pretty darn lean. And I think it speaks volume to the quality of our staff and the fact that they already know that we need to be as efficient as possible with every dollar, and that's how they operate. So thank you again to staff. While working through the budget process is never simple, this year was more difficult than most years for a number of reasons. We've mentioned many times that we have a massive infrastructure challenge ahead of us. The federal government has mandated that by 2039, all municipalities in Canada must cease any wastewater overflows. While it is the right course of action, this alone will likely have a cost in excess of $50 million over the next 18 years for our community. We also have the Exit 12A project and business park realignment, with the town of Bridgewater contributing the entire municipal contribution of $8.4 million. The results of these pressures, as well as the fact that we have increasing costs over the last 9 years, which was the last time that the tax rate was increased, necessitated the need for a residential rate increase. And just before I continue, I just want to give a couple of really quick facts. The first is that our tax rate is about average in Nova Scotia. It's not the lowest, but it's nowhere near the highest for towns. We're about in the middle. And the last year that the tax rate was raised was 2012, as mentioned. The last time it was changed, the commercial rate went down in 2017. I think it's also important to note that, as Councillor McDonald said, COVID has had an impact on municipalities, and through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities lobbying the federal government, only 13% of the funds that the FCM said were needed to get municipalities from coast to coast right again was dispatched by the federal government. 13%. So there's a lot of funding that has to be made up through service cuts or tax rates across the country. And we're not allowed to budget for deficits. So unlike other levels of government, we have to balance these budgets. We have to plan for a balanced budget. And so, again, that's why you have to make these tough decisions. You can't just carry that forward to the next government. And also that the decisions we make are based on a ton of information and data. And I hope that people understand that every member of town council and every person on our staff team is doing their best to make this town an amazing place to live, work, and play. Now, we've spoken about wastewater challenges, we've spoken about Exit 12A, and I do want to highlight again that we've committed to keeping our pavement management budget higher. So we're putting more than $700,000 into pavement management, and additionally, we're putting almost $200,000 into sidewalk maintenance. So that is a large number and something that we haven't been doing in the past. Nobody likes raising taxes, but what we have in front of us now is a plan for the sustained success of our town. It was not an easy decision, or once we pass it, it won't have been an easy decision, but what we are doing is we are investing in the future of Bridgewater in what is the largest one-year capital investment in our history. That's how much we're putting back into this community. So this is an investment not just for 2021 or 2022, but for years to come. And we have an opportunity like no other on a couple of fronts. The first is, as we all know, Energize Bridgewater. That has put a global focus on our town, and we know that existing corporations as well as startups are looking at our community as a solid location to establish themselves. And this will not only bring jobs, but it will also help us attract and retain our young people. I've spoken to a number of new residents who specifically chose Bridgewater after our Smart Cities win because of that plan and our dedication to addressing climate change. The other is the influx of new people to our province and specifically to our area, as the pandemic has highlighted Atlantic Canada as one of the best places in the world to live. While Bridgewater has grown almost every year for 2 decades, we now see people looking to move here from all over the world in unprecedented numbers. This is a good thing as more people bring diversity, opportunity, more skills that can be utilized, shared, and passed down to others. Our budget is built on a planned and predictable path forward. It's realistic and attainable, with our capital projects making no assumptions or expectations of additional funding, which means any funding that we do receive only lessens the burden. Like I said, nobody likes to increase taxes. We spent the last number of years working to reduce expenses as we prepared for the road ahead and the challenge that lies before us. Bridgewater is well positioned for the future. We know that one day the pandemic will end, the state of emergency will be over, and life will return to normal, whatever that looks like. And I'm confident the decisions we are making now will pay dividends for years to come. It doesn't mean it will be easy, but seldom does the right decision an easy one. And I would continue to invite the public to reach out to any member of town council, ask questions, share your ideas and suggestions to help continue Bridgewater's transition into awesomeness. So with that, is someone prepared to make a motion? I was looking right at you. I wasn't even looking at anyone else, Councillor Thorburn.
Okay.
I know you missed those long proclamations, and so here's your chance.
It's been a pleasure over the years to do this. I can't say enough how pleased I am with staff and what they brought to us and how easy it was for us to make that decision. Without their support, we just couldn't do it, and I thank them all. But I would so move that the town of Bridgewater, that the council for the town of Bridgewater approve the 2021-2022 budget table as follows. The capital budget in the amount of $14,252,462. Funding as follows: $880,200 capital out of reserve, general $863,700, police $16,500, $3,979,262 government funding, $1,465,000 gas tax reserve, and capital reserves withdrawal of $309,000. Operating reserve withdrawal of $1,590,000. 2021-2022, $860,000 carry forward, and $730,000 borrowing, $6,029,000 from the Municipal Finance Corporation. Operating expenditures in the amount of $22,556,394, which includes $880,200 capital out of revenue, zero transfer to capital reserve, $625,024 for town debenture repayment, $362,032 for the LCLC debenture repayment, $180,900 capital reserve loan repayment, zero transfer to special purpose tax reserve, $21,633 transferred to the sinking fund reserve, $570,816 transferred to wastewater operating reserve, and $200,000 transferred to police operating reserve. Operating revenue of $22,556,394, which includes zero transfers from capital reserves and $37,094 transferred from special purpose tax reserve and $403,305 transferred to operating reserve. The commercial tax rate be set at $3.97 per $100 of full assessment value of the property, and the residential tax rate to be set at $1.75 per $100 of adjusted assessed value after CAT. A special purpose tax for the payment of the debenture principal and interest for the Lunenburg County Multipurpose Center as follows: commercial tax rate to be set at 6 cents per $100 of full assessed value of the property, and residential tax rate be set at 0.6 cents per $100 of adjusted assessed value of the property after CAT. The interest rate to be paid on capital reserve to be set at 0%. Depreciation in the amount of $3,200,000, which is excluded from the tax rate. In accordance with Policy 92, the interim tax bill will be generated with the current year's taxable assessment and the last tax rate set by council, which will be in the 2021-2022 tax and sewer rates approved April the 12th, 2021, prior to printing of the interim bills. And the interim tax bill will be due on Monday, May the 31st, 2021. The interest rate on overdue accounts be set at 12 cents per annum, charged at 1 cent per month, and the final tax bill will be the current year's taxable assessment and the tax and sewer rates as set by council in the 2021-22 budget. And the final tax bill will become due on Thursday, September the 30th, 2021.
Thank you. I just want to confirm, it's 12% per annum, 1%
Per month.
I think you said, yeah, I think you said cents.
Okay.
And 880,200 capital out of revenue
Yeah.
for general and police. Do I have a seconder? Deputy Mayor Tanner. Further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. Thank you. And the sewer rate. Someone prepared to make that motion?
Where is it?
Councilor Thorburn, you're on roll.
Okay. Okay. That pursuant to Chapter 4, Public Service Bylaws, Section 28, Council for the Town of Bridgewater approved the sewer rates as follows. The owner of every house, shop, or other property within the Town of Bridgewater connected with public sewer of the Town of Bridgewater shall pay to the town for each property owner by him, her, a charge of rate of use of the sewage system as follows. Resident and land lease communities, one dwelling unit, $464.66 plus $177.04 for each additional dwelling unit. Hotels and motels, based on the charge of $986.93 plus $56.75 for each guest unit. Hospital, base charge of $986.93 plus $56.75 for each patient bed. other commercial, shopping centers, institutional, industrial users for the first user, $986.93, plus $504.97 for each additional user. The owner of every house, shop, or other property within the municipality District of Lunenburg connected to the sewer system in Hibbville shall pay to the town of Bridgewater a rate of usage of the sewer system as follows. Residential and land lease communities, per unit, $555.57. Commercial shopping centers, institutional, industrial users, per unit, $1,180.02.
Thank you. Seconded by Councilor Vergier. Discussion?
Question?
Question being called. All those in favor? Those opposed? Motion is carried. So thank you again, staff, for your hard work, your effort. Thank you to the public who reached out to members of council, saw us during our Talk Bridgewater sessions, sent in feedback, called, emailed, texted. So we appreciate your feedback. Thank you very much. And we have an in-camera meeting following this to deal with contract negotiations and personnel under the MGA. Can I now have a motion to adjourn? Councilor Thorburn, seconded by Councilor Caldwell. We are adjourned. Thank you.